Hello everyone, I welcome you all for session 2 of chapter 4, How the Traders Became the Rulers. Now before I start with this session, let me brief you about the previous session. Now in the last session, basically I discussed with you about the subsidiary alliance system and its founder, Lord Wellesley. In today's session, I'll be discussing about the next Governor General, that is Lord Dalhousie and his annexation policy. Now, before I start with annexation policy, we'll also discuss about Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So, the King Maharaja Ranjit Singh was very powerful and how he managed all the affairs of the state. So, we will just look into it in brief and then we'll look into Lord Dalhousie and his annexation policy. Apart from that, we'll also see the victims of this policy and the effects of this policy on people. So, people were completely dissatisfied, they were not happy with the policy. So, how all this started and how people were so depressed and upset with the policy. So, the entire picture we'll look into in this session in detail. So, it's going to be very informative and interesting. So, let's get started with this session. Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Maharaja Ranjit Singh was a strong ruler of Punjab. He had set up a strong army with the help of European officers for the protection of his state. So Maharaja Ranjit Singh was an excellent ruler of Punjab. He also had a very good army, a very strong army, which was trained by the European officers and they were responsible for the protection of his state. So, because of the army and very good training that they were getting from European officers, so Maharaja Ranjit Singh could cover as many states as possible. So, he had gained many victory over the nearby states. The British had an ambition to capture the Sikh kingdom, but they could not do so as long as Maharaja Ranjit Singh was alive. Now, since he was very strong, the Britishers could not dare to do so by capturing the Sikh kingdom. So, they were waiting for the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. After the king died, Governor General Henry Hardinge took over the Sikh rule under the British control. So, once the king died, they got the guts, they got the chance to take over the Sikh rule and bring it under their control. Lord Dalhousie. Lord Dalhousie came to India as the Governor General in 1848. He was from the beginning determined to extend direct British rule over as large area as possible. So Lord Dalhousie, when he came to India as the Governor General, he had a very strong motive to extend the British rule. Some of the Indian kings were carelessly neglecting their duties and were ruling in luxury. Lord Dalhousie could not tolerate the existence of the native rulers within the boundaries of the British Empire. Now, when Dalhousie came to India, he saw that many kings had become completely careless. They were not taking up their responsibilities. So, he wanted to remove them and establish the British Empire. So, he took the opportunity because he already wanted to extend the empire. But since the king became careless, he got a very nice opportunity to enter into the Indian politics. In order to take the states directly into the British rule, he started the policy of annexation. Now, in order to extend British rule, he started a new policy called annexation. The annexation policy. The annexation policy was implemented by Lord Dalhousie, who was the Governor General for the East India Company in India between 1848 to 1856. So this policy was implemented by Dalhousie, who was ruling India approximately between 1848 to 1856. The annexation policy is also called as the doctrine of lapse. So usually this policy is called as the doctrine of lapse, which is also called as annexation policy. As per the annexation policy, if any ruler of a princely state died without a natural heir, the authority of the state will pass to the British East India Company. So, as per the policy, the rules and regulations are actually many, but the main term of the policy is suppose if any ruler dies without a natural heir, so if he does not have his own son, if he's having an adopted son, then that particular kingdom immediately after the death of the king will go to the East India Company. So this was in a way injustice to many kings which they opposed. So this was one way by which they could extend the British Empire. Victims of annexation policy. Under the terms of the annexation policy, the company annexed many princely states like Satara, Jaipur, Sambalpur, Jhansi, Nagpur, Tanjore, Karnataka, Burma. So these were the states who had to by force accept the annexation policy simply because they could not win over the Britishers. So Dalhousie was a fierce imperialist. He adopted the policy of annexation for the expansion of the company and British imperialism in India. So his main focus was to make sure that to grow more and more of territories into his control so that he could create supreme power in the entire country and Britishers could gain more and more of income by getting the territories and imposing various kind of taxes on the states. Effects of doctrine of lapse. Many Indian states lost their sovereignty and became British territories. This led to a lot of unrest among the Indian princes. A lot of people were unhappy with the illegal nature of this doctrine, and this was one of the causes of the Indian Revolt of 1857. So, after the implementation of this policy, many Indian kings had lost their freedom. They became completely dependent on the Britishers. This led to a lot of unrest among the Indian kings. Now, coming towards the end of the session, I'm sure you understood the chapter in this session. Now, the task for home is to write down the features of subsidiary and annexation policy. Now, this will make you understand the difference as well as you will understand the chapter more better if you know the difference between the both the policies. For the next session, I'm going to discuss something more interesting about reforms made by Dalhousie, like railways, post and telegraph, public works department, social reforms, etc. So you can also start planning for this as well as be ready with the information so that you can understand the chapter more better.